Hello again and welcome to a special edition, a custom episode of Marty's Matchbox Makeovers. And this is the vehicle that I shall be customizing today. It's a Matchbox Racing Mini number 29 and it's a Superfast. It's got the Superfast wheels on it. And it says on the base that it was made in 1970, made in England. And looking at it, I was thinking, oh, 1970, that's not very old. And then I kind of realised it means it's actually 50 years old, this little model. So it's quite incredible, really. I just don't know where time has gone. Anyway, this is not exactly the same condition as which I received it. The roof is gold because when I did the gold Rolls Royce, I used this model to practice on before I did the real thing, in case you're wondering. Anyway, the previous owner has painted it black over red. And not only have they done a great job on the body, but they've also done a great job on the windows and painted them all black as well. So I'll be taking these wheels off and swapping those over with some better looking ones, to my mind anyway. Now, what could I do with this Mini to customize it and make it extra special? Well, I'm inspired here by a picture of Mr. Bean, who went shopping, overloaded his Mini and ended up driving home sitting on the roof. So this is what I'm going to try and recreate today, and I'm putting it up there on my notice board to remind me of which direction I'm heading in. So first up, as usual, of course, I've got to get the base off and tip all the little bits and pieces out inside. To do that, I'm going to drill out this rivet on the back using this suitably sized drill bit. Only takes a few seconds to do, and it's a very common way of starting these restorations or makeovers. Or in this case, a custom. So once the head of the rivet's been removed, the base just pulls off like that. Now on this particular model, the rear section is held in by this tab that doubles up as a number plate. And that number plate sticks through a slot on the back, and that's how this model is held together. Now just pulling out the interior there. Oops, it came out quite freely. And oh, look at that, I struck gold. As I said, I used this to experiment with the gold leaf. Now there's no rivet there as such to hold that glass in, so I'm hoping that if I just push it with my fingers it's going to fall out. Doesn't seem to be anything holding it in. Oh, there we go. Dropped out pretty easy, and that's it. That's all the bits. That's all there is to this car. So it's a base, a windscreen, an interior, and the body. Now I'm going to change these Superfast wheels over, as I said, because Mr. Bean's car does not have Superfast wheels. That there looks like, I hope it's a carpet fibre and not a hair of some description. Now I'm bending up this plastic piece, which is supposed to be a working suspension system. And you'll see at the end I end up removing it entirely because it doesn't really suit non-Superfast wheels at all. But I preserved it for the time being because I thought I was going to reuse it. Here's a close-up of that. Right, this window, like I said, yuck. That's really thick black paint on there. And the front of it's smashed and non-repairable, which is a little bit annoying. So I'm going to have to cut that section out and replace it with some clear plastic somehow. The interior is rather basic. Nice detail on the steering wheel. And it's one of these interiors that flip open from the factory and then flip back again for fitting. There's a little bit of black paint on that seat there too as well. Anyway, I'm going to repaint the interior because this is after all a custom and try and make it a little bit more realistic. So just have a quick clean up, put all the bits in a container so they don't get lost, and make a start on the body with the paint stripping. I'll be interested to see how the gold leaf metal comes off with the paint stripper, whether it will be resistant to the chemicals. So today, rather than tipping it out, I'm just applying it with a brush, clean brush, and trying not to pollute the tin of paint stripper by putting the dirty brush back in there too often. So I left this for about 5 minutes when I made a cup of coffee. And when I came back, to my pleasant surprise, the gold leaf metal had come off as if it was just old paint, the same as the rest of it. Now look at this. How satisfying is that when you can just push off the roof covering in one press of the brush? It's a great feeling, very therapeutic, this hobby. Things like this just help you unwind at the end of the day. Right, using a rubber glove to protect my hand and some paper towel, I'm just trying to scrub off as much of the paint there that I can and see if I need to reapply some more fresh paint stripper. And I actually end up doing that just to get those little extra pieces off by scrubbing them with a toothbrush under a running tap. So here we are, it's all clean, and the next stage, as we probably all know, is to drill out a hole in the rivet post, which I've just drilled to remove the base. And I'm going in pretty deep this time because I'm running out of the short screws and I've got loads of longer screws. I think they're 4mm long. So I'm going in just a little bit deeper than normal so I can start using up my excess long screws. Then I use that thread cutting tool called a tap, and there's a close-up of one of those screws I'm talking about. I think they're 4mm long. Very tiny little things are easy to go missing, so as soon as I've drilled and tapped the hole, I always immediately put a screw in there as a test fit, make sure I've gone in deep enough so it doesn't sit proud when the base is placed back on. Well, that looks pretty mighty fine to me. I'm happy with that. And now I'm just going to give the metal a bit of a buff up with this chargeable Dremel that I treated myself to a couple of months ago, and it's quite a good thing. Right, the battery's missing, so it's over here in the charger. Let's check. I think it's been on all day. Yes, fully charged. That's a good sign. 4 greens. So here we go. I just using my thumb, you have to lock the chuck by pushing up on that little grey tab and then tighten it up with a spanner. And away we go. And what I like about this is it's light and easy to use like a pencil, rather than having the rather larger plug-in type Dremel that I've used for a number of years. This is quite a nice little thing to have on the bench when you want to do this kind of thing. I'm also experimenting with my phone. There's a slow motion. I was hoping to catch one of those fibres flying off in slow motion, because they were coming off all the time when I was doing this, but unfortunately I wasn't able to capture it on film. But I'll show you at the end just how many of these fibres came off and are lying around in the room. It's a bit of a hazard, so always be mindful of wearing eye protection when you're using these spinning brushes, because especially these cheap ones, they do tend to separate quite quickly and throw the fibres everywhere. There, I'm showing you on my cutting mat there, there's a few just lying around after I've cleaned it up. There's even a few in the carpet here. I looked down and saw one. There it is. I'm trying to focus on it to let you see. Now these are very dangerous in the carpet, because if you walk around barefoot or in socks like I do, every week, I reckon, at least once a week, I get one of these fibres stuck in my foot, and it's not very pleasant. So yeah, it's something to be mindful of. And I do always vacuum my after every makeover, I vacuum my hobby room as well to try and minimise the risk of that happening. Clean hobby room is a safe hobby room. I know, makes you want to puke in your mouth, doesn't it?
I know, right? I went like this smart and I went.
So I'm going to paint this model, of course, the green colour of Mr. Green, Mr. Green's bean colour. No, green bean. I'm going to paint this car green, the same green as Mr. Bean. But before I do that, I put some undercoat on it there, the Tamiya, and I'm going to changed the number plate to match the real thing, Mr. Bean's car. I don't know what number plate this is, but yeah, I'm just rubbing it away with this flat file. I'm going to make a little decal to go on there at the end, just for the finishing touch. That's lovely. Look at that radiator grille. That's got to be painted black as well. So, having a look at this model, there's very limited detail on it. It's not up to your usual Matchbox standard. I guess it's because it's a later manufactured product. You can see the tail lights are very rudimentary. There's a what is that? Fuel cap there. Vaguely resembles a fuel cap. But check out the doors. There's no actual doors, so you've got to get into this Mini. Maybe it's because it's a racing Mini. You have to climb through the windows. I don't know. So I'm going to have to make a seam there to represent the door, because as we all know, Mr. Bean's car, he locks his doors up with a bolt and padlock. And so I need a seam so I can span the gap there with a small bolt and padlock that I'm going to make. So I just use that triangular file. I think they're called 3 square actually. And I just put a groove in the driver's side there, so that I have a reference to put the locking bolt on. Right, now, what am I doing here? Oh yeah, I'm rubbing the wheels off this car. And this came in package number 178 that was sent by Andy Edwards from Bro in the UK. It had horse-drawn fire trucks in that package as well, and a card album. So thank you, Andy. Without you, I would not have these wheels to use for this custom makeover. Now, I was hoping they would just come straight off, but that's not always the case. And as you can see, the front one there, I had to actually use my Dremel to remove the ends. In fact, both of them there, I had to actually use my Dremel to remove the ends of the axle, so I could get them off the model. I thought they would just fall off, similar to the Superfast ones, but that didn't happen. Now I'm doing a test fit of the axle underneath that orange suspension block there to see whether or not my idea is feasible. And it's not, because you'll see after I put the tyres on, the 2 diagonally opposite wheels are off the ground and the other 2 are on the ground, and the whole thing rocks and sways like rubbish. So I end up ripping that suspension piece out and not using it in the end. Anyway, to reform the end of the axles up there to captivate those new wheels back onto the original axle, I'm just putting this bolt with a small indentation drilled in it, and I'm using a nail punch in my portable hammer drill, and in my vise in my hobby room I'm just going to hammer it at high speed momentarily, and it will just peen the end over very slightly and enough to prevent the wheels from falling off. And it's good because it's raining outside, it's quite cold, it's winter over here in Australia, and it means that I don't have to go out to the shed. Now I'm going to paint the bonnet. Originally this was my idea. I was going to paint the bonnet black and then mask it off and paint the body green, and then reveal a beautiful black bonnet. So speeding things along, I chuck this in my little pizza oven and leave it to cook for 10 minutes to try and bake that paint on, so that I can apply the masking tape without having to wait 24 hours. So that satin, I do like that satin black. It comes out kind of not matte, not gloss, something in between. It's a great product, and I usually do my bases with it. Anyway, here we go. I'm using this 3M, and that's MMM tape, and it's supposed to be low tack, and it's builder's choice, you know. Everyone who's anyone, if you're into the painting trade, apparently they all use this blue MMM 3M tape. But look at that. When I was in the process of attempting to trim it to size, I momentarily lifted it up to see if I could locate that seam in the bonnet. And guess what? The black paint came off. So that first idea didn't work. So I had to re-coat it with some undercoat. And now I am attempting to blend some yellow and green together to make a colour that looks like Mr. Bean's green. Now there's a lot of confusion about what colour the car should be, and I guess there's a lot of people have made their own Mr. Bean cars in real life. There's also different types of colour in some of the episodes, and in fact some of the promotional photographs I found online, there was a whole range of colours. So I've basically picked one mid-range that I felt looked good, and yeah, there is no sort of hard and fast rule, I think, regarding the colour of Mr. Bean's Mini. So this is the colour I'm going with, and I use a little battery operated stirring stick there. Claire Ravenwood sent me 8 months ago, I guess. It's a great thing. Alright, before I use my airbrush, I always just run some thinners through it. Small, give it a couple of blasts, just to clean out the nozzle in case there's some remaining paint from the last time I used it. I do generally try and clean it as thoroughly as possible each time I use it, but I found that, you know, it's always a good idea just to wet the old whistle, if you will, with some thinners, and then you can get straight into painting the model. Hassle-free almost. Oh, look at that. That is a beautiful colour, and it's gone on great. I think that's Mr. Hobby colours there I used. Did I show you those? I might have missed out that. This is the colour I'm using for the interior as well. I don't like the yellow plastic. It looks a bit tacky. So by magic, I paint it this sail colour, flat matte number 85. Now, what am I doing here? Well, I don't have a figure of Mr. Bean, so I jumped on Thingiverse and I downloaded this model of a man that's sitting, and it's actually called Hannibal, I think, a name supposed to represent Hannibal Lecter. And I shall give credit in the description as to who designed it. I also downloaded this chair to go on the roof for this Mr. Bean to sit in, and I printed these off in various scales to give myself options to pick the right one for the model. Now, I figured the one on the left is a little bit too big, the one on the right is a little bit too small, but the one in the middle is just perfect size. So that's the one I'm going to run with. Now the 3D printer, when it's printing small things like this, they always end up a little bit rough and they have to be cleaned up before you can use them. So after about an hour of cleaning and another hour of painting, this is what I'm left with. And I know up close it looks awful, but you know, on the car at the end it looks pretty cool. So bear with me. Now these 4 tyres, I was lucky enough to find 4 matching tyres that fit those chrome rims. Now they were a little bit shabby, a bit faded, so I'm just giving them a wash of some Tamiya X1 gloss black paint, and it will just make them look a little bit newer. You know, you're painting a model, it's going to look brand new when it's done, hopefully, and you can't put old faded tyres on it, so that's why I do that. Now this number plate here is very, as you can see, extremely small, 2 millimeters high and 8 millimeters wide. What I did was I cut out some white backed decal paper and stuck it on the top of a normal sheet of A4 and then fed it into my printer. That way I didn't have to waste a whole sheet of the decal paper. This is incredibly small and to the naked eye looks really, really crisp, but obviously when you're zooming in with the camera it looks a bit ordinary. Now I had to glue these axles in using some Araldite because it was the only way I could think of fixing them. I mean, I could have used some JB Weld, but the Araldite only takes 15 minutes to dry. Whilst that was setting, I figured I'd have a go at cleaning the windscreen, see how good I could get it. I'm using an old method here, I haven't used it for a while. It's .3 brake fluid, and every time I do it, I can't remember if it's .3 or .4. So I've got both. So I give it a go with the .3 to begin with. Now these are fresh, clean cotton buds. Just dip it in the brake fluid and smear it onto the paint. And it generally dissolves the paint but not the plastic. And as you go, you can see the colour of the cotton bud changing as the paint is removed. It took probably about 15 minutes to do this. It can be quite fiddly, and it was taking longer than I remembered, so I rushed out to my garage and brought in the .4. It's a different colour, look, it's very lighter. And I had to go with the .4. And my opinion was that the .3 was actually a better product to use, because this really didn't do much at all. I mean, a tiny little bit of paint came off, but the .3 brake fluid was the way to go. Some people have suggested using oven cleaner as well. I haven't tried that. I should try that one day. I'm always scared I'm going to shrivel up the plastic, you know, putting chemicals on them. So I've got most of the paint off, practically all of it actually, and I'm just giving the plastic now a little polish using this aluminium polish. I find that aluminium polish is a little bit gentler than some metal polishes that you can get. Obviously aluminium's a weaker metal, so it doesn't need to be so abrasive, I guess. Well, you can't, you know, this is a 50-year-old item, and it's very difficult to get anything that old that's been played with and left out in the sun to look any good. This was as good as I could get it. As for the front windscreen, I'm going to cut it out. I'm also going to remove that right-hand quarter pane to make the window a little bit wider so I can fit a broom in there, which is what Mr. Bean used to operate the brake and accelerator in the episode which featured this car. I thought I'd use the X-Acto blade to begin with. A bit slow going, and figured no, that's not a good idea. So I ended up getting out the little Dremel with the cutting wheel. On a relatively low speed, I just took my time and cut through it because I didn't want a lot of melted plastic to clean up. It worked quite well. Made short work of it anyway. So the windscreen and the right hand quarter pane, I think they're called, is now off. And I've just got to clean up the edges there with a small emery board, and then I should find a bit of plastic and try and recreate the front windscreen. So a couple of days ago, in fact, I bought something. It was in a blister pack. I can't remember what it was, and I kept the plastic, not knowing that I was be using it within the next 48 hours. So never throw anything away that you think you might use. So I had this, and I'm thinking, if I just cut this generally to size and glue it on one side first, and then maybe I can warp it to fit and make it look like a windscreen. So I came up with this idea where I cut strips along the edge of it and separated them, and then I cut one set off, so I was left with one set like little tabs there. And then I just glued the first one on the left there, and I left it to set, and then I could flex the windscreen around and glue the other tabs down as I went from left to right using this plastic contact adhesive. It's a bit fiddly, a bit time consuming as well. I'm sure there's other ways of doing this, but this is the first time I tried this, and seems to work okay. It's an option anyway. If you're trying to fix one of these, it's an option that you may wish to use. Now for the padlock and bolt on the door, I really had no idea what I was looking for, but I went through an old box of spare model parts and sort of rummaged around until I found something that I could modify to look like a padlock and a hasp, and here it is. And I painted it silver, and I reckon it's turning out to be the best bit of the whole model. So anyway, there's the broom and mop tied together with string as well that I made. Now these are all the bits, and I'm going to be putting them together. So that's the new wheels. That's the tan interior. I painted the steering wheel black as well. The chair, I checked the episode again, and it was sort of a very strange drab greeny grey. Here's Mr. Bean. Actually looks a little bit like Dr. Spock in my mind. The broom I made from an old paintbrush, crushed the end and stuck it on this wire, and then I painted the wire to look like wood on one end for the mop. There's that. That's my pride and joy, that little padlock, I tell you. And the number plate, of course, to go on there. So I'll do that first. I'm going to put the number plate on, then I'm going to put the padlock on, and then I'm going to assemble the rest of it. Now look how tiny that is. It's crazy. Possibly the smallest decal I've ever printed and ever used. It's not easy when you've got fingers like mine. So I use a cocktail stick to assist me in the positioning of this tiny little thing. You can feel my frustration, I'm sure. But overall, I'm quite pleased with the result. And now I'm probably going to get someone send me a message and say you got the number plate wrong. I hope I didn't. I think I checked a few times. And there we go. I'll just remove the excess moisture with a bit of tissue there and give it a quick coat of the clear Tamiya clear coat to seal the edges. Now I'm going to put this little padlock on the door so it bridges the seam that I made. I cut in there with the file. I'm just using one little dollop of Starbond medium viscosity because I've run out of the thin stuff. And rather than applying it directly to the model, I'm going to sacrifice a brush here because I only want the smallest amount underneath the padlock, and I'm just painting it on there. And I don't want it to squeegee out either when I place the lock on the door. So I'm just taking off a little bit of excess there. I'm worried I'm going to wreck the paint, and then I'll be back to square one again. And I've been on this about, I reckon, 4 days now. Got to be quick with the super glue. You know how quickly it dries, and I'm scared it's going to go on crooked. There's so many things that can go wrong. Anyway, I'll just get it lined up, and then I press it down and let that glue set. And I'm really, really pleased because there's no squeegeed glue out the side or anything. It looks quite neat. Now for the rest of it, put the interior in and the base on, and then Mr. Bean, I'm going to mount him in his couch. No, it's not a couch, is it? What is it? What do you call that sort of chair? A chair. An armchair. In his armchair. I'm going to glue Mr. Bean in his armchair. I'm lining up that rear tongue in the slot. I didn't bother putting a number plate on the rear because it's ridiculously small. I just put the one on the front for now. Looking good. Oh, I made a little badge for the bonnet as well, out of another bit of metal that I found in the tank kit, leftover bits. Just a little bit of photo etched metal I chopped up and glued on the bonnet there as a Mini Cooper badge. I was thinking in my mind which orientation to put him. Should I have him skewed one side or the other, like in the picture? But I ended up just sitting him in straight up and down. I figured that looked a little bit better. So here's a reminder of what I started with. Like I said, 4 days in the making. This was the gold and black Mini Cooper, or Racing Mini, made in the 1970s. And this is what it looks like now. There's a little bit of silicone hanging down underneath in centre there. Didn't realise until now, so I'm going to get a cocktail stick in there and remove that, make it look a little bit better. I've painted the fuel cap and the tail lights. And that cartoony sized padlock on there looks pretty cool, I think. And now this is the finished car. My wife Julie helped me with the fiddly stringing and tying the steering rope and securing the chair on the roof with a little bit of rope that she plaited to make it look thicker at this scale. And I'll tell you what, I'm really, really happy with the finished result of this little thing. It's a little ripper. Okay, well, it's been a long day, so I'm going to turn in now and get a good night's sleep.
Oh, Teddy. Oh, Asterix. Look at the time.
Thanks for watching. Until next time, this is Marty from Marty's Matchbox Makeovers saying goodbye.
Do his. No, his makeup would go like that. No, that would go like that. Oh, like that.
It doesn't look like that.
It does go like that. Right, I'm just going to get some hairspray. Give us a look. Oh my God, you look like Mr. Bean.